Good evening, καλησπέρα σας. Καλώς ορίσατε και πάλι στην εκπομπή μας. Elections are coming up very soon, and we have another candidate tonight with us. It's Mr. Ross Houston.
Yes.
Good evening, how are you?
Thank you. Lovely
Labour,
to be here.
yes?
Labour candidate in Finchley and Golders Green constituency.
Okay. Before we go further, would you mind giving us a little bit information about yourself? I mean, what do you do, and you were born in Scotland, I suppose?
Yes, I was born in Glasgow, but I was brought up in Kirkcaldy, which is a town on the east coast of Scotland, and probably most famous recently for having Gordon Brown as the local MP. So my parents still live there, and my sister and her family, and her 4 children, and my brother-in-law. So I go back to Scotland quite a lot. But I've lived in London since the 1980s, and I came down here as a student, and I stayed. And I've lived in Finchley for over 20 years. And I've been a councillor in Finchley, representing West Finchley ward since 2006. I'm currently deputy leader of the Labour group on Barnet Council. So I've been very involved in lots of community, being involved in the local community and in local politics in Barnet for a long time.
Mm-hmm. We have plenty of, Cypriots living and Greeks living in the area there. How much do you know about them? I mean, we have active, members of the community in the area. How much do you know? How much do you know about the community?
Oh, I regularly attend meetings at the community centre in Britannia Road, and I've got many Greek and Cypriot friends. In fact, my best friend is Greek Orthodox and is very devout and goes to church every Sunday. So often goes to a monastery. So I'm very much aware of the community, and as I say, lots of friends in the community. I'm also the councillor that represents Christos Karoulis lives in my ward. So if I ever I do bump into him, the president of the
National Federation.
National Federation. So he's very good at lobbying all the local politicians in Barnet and keeping us all informed. For myself from
it's his job
MP,
actually to do that.
Absolutely, yes. And he does that with all the parties, and it's very good at keeping us informed. But obviously, living where I do, the Cypriot and Greek population is part of the community. There are friends, there are neighbours, and anyone living where I do would be aware of the issues.
Do you say kalimera to them when you meet them?
No, I don't. But I'm always terrified of mispronouncing. But it's,
okay.
But yes, I do know. I do know how to cross myself properly as well in an Orthodox church. So.
You're going to the church very often? To the Orthodox church?
I do with I've for a long time I've always gone to the Easter service at an Orthodox church, partly because my friend Joe takes me. And I regularly go to St Catherine's. They're just down the road from where I live, and Father Damon always has. There's always a great hospitality there. I have to say it's a very friendly congregation.
So Mr. Karoulis, and he gives you all the information about Cyprus. What do you know about Cyprus? What are your thoughts about Cyprus at the moment? Because there is so much happening, you know what I mean? And we have Turkey.
I think I really hope that following the Berlin meeting that this will kickstart a new effort to resolve the problem of Cyprus and the problem of the Turkish occupation. We have had many false dawns over the years. It's an issue that I've been very interested in for a long time. I think the fact that there's a new commission in the European Union allows a fresh start. It's a shame there is not a British commissioner, because I think Britain has a unique role in terms of Cyprus. We're one of the guarantor powers, and I think we all know what the solution has to be. It has to be an end to the occupation. It has to be a Republic of Cyprus that's bi-communal and bi-zonal, and it is a federation, and the property issues have to be resolved. I think the proposal a number of years ago was actually a good starting point. I mean, we have a very strong attachment in Barnet to Morphu, and we would like to see Morphu and a resolution to Morphu in terms of being part of the sort of resettlement of a village and a community that was Greek, and so I've got a particular interest in seeing Morphu as part of the settlement. But that has to be negotiated, and it has to be something which both sides commit to. And it's something that I think the British government needs to play a more active role in. I think one of the things I would criticise the current government for is not standing up to Turkey enough, particularly over the drilling in the Mediterranean. And I think, this is one of the results of Brexit. I think we're so desperate to have a trade deal with Turkey that actually we've lost sight of our obligations to Cyprus. And I think that's something that a Labour government, I think, would take a far tougher line on.
Mm-hmm. So what more can you do? I mean, if you be elected and, have the chance to talk, in a House of Parliament, what more can you do to bring the, Cyprus problem up than anybody else, any other candidates?
Well, I do understand the issues. I mean, I am committed to seeing that it is ridiculous that Nicosia is the only capital in Europe that's divided. And I've been to Cyprus on holiday. I've had very happy family holidays in Cyprus. And it's a country that I've got a great deal of affection for. And it is terrible when you see the green zone and you see the fact that that city is divided. And, Cyprus is a Commonwealth country. It's a partner of the United Nations, and it's a partner still in the European Union, because our country is still in the European Union as we speak, something which I hope continues, I have to say, after the election. And I think for all those reasons, we have to resolve this. This has gone on, this is the European issue that is unresolved post the end of the Cold War, and and Britain has a particular role. With our 2 sovereign bases in Cyprus, we are part of the solution to this, and we have to play a very active role working with our European partners and working with the Republic of Cyprus government to try and resolve the situation.
Mm-hmm. Ethnic minorities, in your area there are so many, and what are your plans for future? I mean, and especially there is a couple of very big issues, NHS, education, and safety. What are your plans, and what you can offer, which is going to be better than your,
Well, I think the key difference between the Labour manifesto and the Conservative manifesto is that the Labour manifesto sees a role for government, and it sees a role for the government working with the private sector. Now, I mentioned my hometown of Kirkcaldy, where I grew up during the miners' strike, when Mrs Thatcher, who was the MP for the seat I'm currently standing in, I brought in a philosophy of where the public sector was not considered, in my view, good. Private sector was very much the focus, and we had a programme of privatisation. I think we need to redress the balance. Most European countries are quite happy to have the state play a role in providing infrastructure. We've gone on a road of actually underinvestment in our public services. And when you look at countries like Germany and Sweden and Holland and our European neighbours, they actually take a far more proactive role. And I think, you mentioned a number of issues. The health service is very important. This year I had, unfortunately, to use Barnet General Hospital a lot, because I had to have a major surgery on my shoulder. And the staff are great, and it's a very good value system. We spend less of our GDP than any other comparable modern economy, and yet we get a very good service. But it is underfunded, and it's very clear that some of the care in the community aspect of it and the kind of aftercare physiotherapy is underfunded, and the staff are all very pushed. So Labour is proposing a major reinvestment in our health service. One of the things that I think is a very key part of our manifesto commitment is to have a national care service. This is an issue that's been talked about for over a decade. We've got 1.5 million elderly people who struggle at home with care and with having the care package that they need. Now in Scotland, the Scottish Government has brought in free care for the elderly over 65. It is a sensible investment in our community. It's vital that older people are allowed to stay at home as long as possible and we provide the care. Now, when I was recovering from surgery, I had to have some care at home. And you really do realise that if you don't have the ability to, say, dress yourself or get up and move around, that actually that visit early in the morning from someone who's able to allow you to do that allows you to have a proper life. Otherwise, you're sat in your dressing gown, maybe watching television, and actually very much excluded. And I think that's a really, really important focus for our manifesto. and not forcing people to give up their homes as part of that. Keeping people in their homes and providing the care in the community. We used to have district nurses. We hardly see district nurses now. Having that primary care that helps people live in their community without having to sell their homes. You asked about schools. I've been a chair of governors of a Finchley school for the last 11 years. And the school cuts crisis is real. And the funding formula that was changed really discriminates against London schools. And we need to invest in schools. And Labour have a package to actually do that and put the investment into our education system. If we do leave the European Union, we need to be competitive and we need to invest in our children. One of the other things I think is part of that is actually having free university tuition fees. Because to be competitive in the modern world, we have to have an educated workforce. And Scotland, again, has abolished tuition fees. And that, if you're a London parent in particular, and as a Londoner I really see this, your kids start life with a handicap because they have to be able to live and rent or buy property in London, which is and that's really unaffordable. The young kids now start with a £30,000 to £40,000 debt already when they leave university, and then they have to try and find a deposit for a house in places like Finchley. It's almost impossible, and I think we owe the young people of this country a better start in life, and I think getting rid of tuition fees is one of those things. Also, investing in housing and in regulating the private rental sector, which is another key part of our programme.
So you're supporting a plan for free education?
For tuition fees to be free, yes. Yeah. And I think that happens in Scotland, and it's been successful, and it's stopped a barrier for education for people who can't afford to. And it also it allows young people to actually take the choice to go into further education and get a university degree without having the fear of having a debt around their neck next to the rest of their life. And I think that's a really important thing. I was fortunate enough to go to university in London in the 80s when I didn't have to pay tuition fees. So I was able to start life without a massive debt around my neck, which is
going back to security, talking about security earlier on, do you think the security in Britain affected by the way Britain acted and getting involved in wars?
Well, I personally was not in favour of the Iraq War, and the Labour MP at the time, Rudy Viss in Finchley and Golders Green, he voted against the Iraq War. That's one example of a conflict which I think what didn't happen there was no investment in reconstruction and post the fall of the Iraqi regime. It was a terrible regime. No one regrets the demise of Saddam Hussein, but actually we should have, I think we should have done it with more international agreement, and we should have put in investment in reconstruction. I think the Middle East is an area where the solution is actually through diplomacy and through using our influence as a government to seek peace. I think war is not, we have to obviously, the Islamic State and terrorist organisations have to be opposed, but we do need to use the British government's influence to try and seek for peace in the Middle East. And I think Cyprus isn't in the Middle East, but it is part of when you're in Cyprus, you're very near to Israel and Palestine and Lebanon and Turkey, and I think the future of the world is not about solving problems through armed conflict. It's about solving problems through diplomacy, which is exactly what was happening in Berlin just a few weeks ago. War doesn't solve things. Some days you have to have your armed forces ready, and one of the things that Labour is committed to is the 2% spend on armed forces, and actually using our armed forces as peacekeepers and through soft diplomacy to be available throughout the world. And I think that is a correct role for our armed forces. I think we have to have a zero. We have to be tough on terrorism, and I think we have to be very aware of the threats that our society has. But we have to engage as partners in trying to find negotiated settlements to the problems of the world. And I think, the recent NATO meeting was. I'm a great supporter of NATO, but there are serious conversations that we have to be had within NATO. President Macron raised the issue of Turkey and the Turkish incursion into Syria. I don't think that's helped the situation, and we have to be tough and be honest about the situation in the Middle East. And I think the Americans turned a blind eye to Turkish incursion into Syria. There has to be a solution in terms of Turkey and Iraq and the Kurdish issue, but it's not a solution that's helped by the Turkish government, in my view, going into Syria and making the problem worse.
Mm-hmm. It's good to have plans and promise to your voters that you're going to change things and all this kind of thing. It's two more things I want to ask you about it. One is, do you support the idea of Conservative Party is bringing up the plan of 20 more police people in? Do you support this idea?
Oh, I support absolutely support far better funding for our police services. I mean, the Conservative plan is to actually put back police officers that they cut. And one of the problems we have in London and else throughout the country with knife crime and everything else is the police service are really stretched, and that's because of the cuts that the current Conservative government have made. And that dates back to the coalition government before that. The police are the front line in terms of our public safety, and they need to be resourced. And one of the sort of games that I think is played about police funding is that if you don't cut frontline officers, now they have cut frontline officers, but if you don't cut frontline officers, you're not making a cut to the police service. Well, actually, anyone who works for the police service, and a friend of mine was a borough commander in a borough not far from here, and he said, when you cut the back services, that means you've got frontline police officers doing paperwork and doing all the other jobs, which actually they should be out on the streets and being visible in the community. I think it was a great mistake to get rid of the police, the community support officers. We had ward-based police teams, and as a local councillor, I used to meet them regularly. They were the eyes and the ears of the police force. And actually, the PCSOs, which when they first came in, I think some police officers were quite sceptical. Well, after a few years, almost every police officer I spoke to was a big fan of having PCOs. And actually, it was a way of recruiting police. And actually, people would become a PCSO and then go for full police training. And it's about knowing your community. It's having police in the community. And it's amazing how big an impact that can have, and even in things like terrorism. Because if you've got PCSOs and police who are based in their local community, in your ward, they know who lives there, they know the shopkeepers, they know the people who run the local pubs, and they know the community, and they know the local school kids, and the troublesome school kids, the 16-year-old lads who sometimes misbehave at bus stops and all that sort of stuff. And they know who that is, and they can go, and they often know where are able to knock on the doors of their parents and say, look, your lad was out mucking around and vandalising a bus shelter, this has to stop. And they also pick up on suspicious activity. And actually, in terms of combating terrorism, that's actually very important. Someone who can see something that looks unusual, it's not the usual person in that place who's doing that particular business, a garage that's been used for a particular purpose, and they're able to report that. And without that, and that's about having people on the ground, PCSOs and police officers. Without that, actually, our security is far less effective. And I think we need to get back to having that community-based policing. And the Labour Party is the manifesto commitment on policing is very strong. We're going to invest in our police services, and that means frontline officers.
Okay, investing, this is a main point, investing in security, investing in education. Where the money is going to come from?
Well, our manifesto is costed, and we are going to put up a corporation tax. We're also going to tax the top 5% of earners more. Not exorbitant rates of tax, but just more when you earn over, when you're in the top 5%, which is earning over 80,000 a year. And there's also one of the things that's very clear in the Labour manifesto is a commitment, a fiscal responsibility rule that we will balance the budget within 5 years in terms of income coming in and expenditure. We will borrow to invest. We'll borrow to invest in things like council homes, things like new hospital buildings, not done via PFI, because actually that has ended up costing more money in the long run. I have to say that was a Labour government initiative, but that's it is actually better to borrow to invest in our infrastructure. And something like council housing is a good example, because if we we've got a very ambitious programme to invest in council homes over a 10-year period, 100,000 homes a year, a high percentage of which will be council homes. When you invest in a council home, you're housing a family that at the moment we're paying benefits for staying in the private sector. So we're paying market rents to keep a family in the private sector, out of the state benefit system, rather than investing in bricks to build a council home which will be let at a social rent and actually cost the state less in the long run. And I remember going to hear a launch of a report about housing 5 years ago by an organisation, funded by an organisation that runs council homes across the country. It's a federation of arm's length management companies. And they commissioned a report which was headed up by a city banker. Now, I remember him introducing himself. He said, I'm a Conservative voting, low tax believing, right-wing city banker, and I've been involved in this report about the economics of council house building. And he said, I have to say, as a taxpayer, it's a no-brainer that we build council houses. We're being ripped off because we're paying these exorbitant private rents to allow people, working families, to stay to live in the community, rather than building homes that once built will be a permanent asset owned by the local council and able to house future generations of families. So I think that countries like Germany invest in their infrastructure, they invest in their housing, and they have very successful economies because the state is a partner to do those, to provide the infrastructure, the schools, the hospitals, the roads, that allows business to flourish, and successful states do that. Okay.
Now, Brexit
yes.
is a big issue. What are your plans for Brexit? I mean, do you have a better plan than Conservatives or other parties? And what do you have in mind?
Well, I'm a passionate Remainer. I was deputy agent for the Stronger In campaign during the referendum in Barnet, and I led the Labour In campaign throughout Barnet Borough. And since the referendum, I helped set up and currently chair Finchley Golders Green for Europe, which is our People's Vote organisation in the constituency. So I'm a very passionate Remainer. I think it's a disaster leaving the European Union, and for a whole range of issues. I mean, Cyprus is a good example. The European Union has played a role in pushing Cyprus up the international agenda. And we are far better working with our partners in Europe and our neighbours to solve problems. Cutting ourselves off is a big mistake, and it's a big mistake economically. I think the Conservative policy, the current deal that Boris Johnson has, is a very bad deal. It's worse than the May deal. It's far more hard Brexit. Unless it's the Northern Ireland solution means that Northern Ireland at least has a less harsh Brexit deal, but we will have customs down the Irish Sea. There's no avoidance of that, so it doesn't meet any of the criteria that the Conservative government originally set for negotiations. And there's a risk of no deal with Johnson. He's giving himself a year, and if we don't get a deal, we might fall out without a deal. The European Union are quite clear that a year is quite a long time to negotiate the type of deal that Boris wants to negotiate. The Liberal Democrat position is to revoke and leave and basically stay in without having another referendum. I think that's very dangerous. I mean, most of us know a Leave voter. In fact, my Greek friend I referred to earlier actually voted for Leave, my Greek Orthodox friend. And if you just cancel a national referendum without going back to the people, that will just be a gift to Nigel Farage, because he'll just run a campaign saying implement the vote, and he'll back the future Conservative government to come into power and just cancel Brexit, bring back leaving the EU without a deal on the agenda. And I think that will be counterproductive. People in Sunderland and Stoke will feel very disenfranchised by doing that. I think the European vote was a protest vote in a lot of the country. A lot of the country feels very left out of the economic success that the South East has. And I think there was an element of a protest vote, but ignoring those communities is going to be very destructive. And just saying your vote doesn't matter, very destructive to national unity. And I think it's the wrong policy, and it won't put it to bed. The Labour position is to have a public vote and to have Remain on the ballot. I allow Labour MPs to campaign for Remain, and most of the Labour MPs will campaign for Remain. John McDonnell, Diane Abbott, Emily Thornberry, Bambos, and Keir Starmer have all said they will campaign for Remain. And I think we'll win that vote. And if we win that vote for Remain, we will put this issue to bed for a generation. And the public will, the Leave voters will think, well, actually, when we had a deal, we voted on it and we decided to stay, and I'll accept that. Cancelling the vote won't work. The Labour position on a Labour deal is very clear. Keir Starmer has led the Labour Party's position as a shadow Brexit secretary in this, and he's been very clear. We want to stay in the customs union. We want to have access to the single market. We want to keep the environmental and workplace protections. We want to stay in all the pan-European organisations like Erasmus and all the the European crime organisation, and actually things like Euratom and all the pan-European organisations. So we'll still be part of the European family very clearly. We'll still have access to the European market. We'll be like Norway. That is a very easy deal to negotiate because it's basically what Norway has at the moment. And it's also more in line with what the European Union would, if we are going to leave, would rather have. And it's a far less risky position to take than leaving under the Boris hard Brexit. I would still very much think that Remain is the best deal we'll get, and we should stay in. If we want to have British influence within Europe, we should stay as a full member. But at least the risk there, if the Leave vote does win again, is a sensible, soft Brexit deal. And during the referendum, we had all these conversations with all the Leave campaigns saying, "Oh, we'll have trading relationships with the Germans. Sell more cars to us than we buy from them, so they want to have a trading arrangement." So how No Deal Brexit became what the Brexiteers wanted, I do not understand, because that was not what was discussed during the referendum. We'll all remember those arguments during the referendum. And actually, Nigel Farage used Norway as an example. So how this no deal Brexit extreme position has become the Conservative policy, I do not understand. In terms of actually, the moving on from Brexit, we have a lot of the issues that you've raised earlier that we have to address as a country. Until we solve Brexit, we cannot move on, and I think that's a real problem. The Conservatives' mantra is, we've got an oven-ready deal, we will solve Brexit. Boris's deal is just a set of negotiating points that we'll have to negotiate. It doesn't put anything to bed. The Labour deal is what Norway has and is very easy to achieve. And the customs union is a good example. We talk about Cyprus and we talk about Turkey. Turkey's in the customs union. Turkey's not in the European Union. Turkey's not going to be in the European Union any time in my lifetime, I suspect. Certainly with the current government, it's not going to get into the European Union. But it's in the customs union. So the idea that the customs union was what we voted on 3 years ago is nonsense, because it's not the same thing. And this is there's been so much disinformation about the whole European debate. But I think the Labour position is a sensible one. It gets us through, allows the country to decide the position and move on. And I will be campaigning for Remain.
Okay, before we go, before we close, let's say, for example, we have a new government, Labour government.
I would love to see a new government.
Well, let's say, for example...
You would expect me to say that, of course.
Well, yes, definitely. Okay, and, Cyprus, get its independence in 1960, okay? And we have three guarantors, Britain, Turkey, and Greece.
Yeah.
And they promised to keep their, they say they keep their promises.
Yeah.
Do you think if we have a Labour government, they're going to go back to this time, 1960, and renegotiate their signatures and keep their promises?
Well, I think we haven't kept our promise since that time.
You haven't? Yes.
No, I think that's very clear. And I think I think what happened during the invasion was something that was, an unresolved issue for our country in terms of our something we should be ashamed of, because we didn't do enough to to actually intervene at the time and actually stop and make sure and put pressure on Turkey to withdraw, because the invasion didn't help solve anything. Now, you can argue about that the situation running up to the invasion, and you can argue that actually the then Greek government helped make the situation worse by getting involved. But what happened was a violation of the territorial integrity of Cyprus, and everyone in the international community has agreed that the territorial integrity of Cyprus is sacrosanct. That is the internationally agreed position. Cyprus is a member of the Commonwealth. We're a guarantor of power, and we should have stood up and put pressure on Turkey to come to the negotiating table and then agree a withdrawal of their troops. We didn't do that at the time.
Are you going to do it
in
the future?
Our leader has always been very supportive and very clear on his view on the Turkish.
It's important for Cypriots.
The Turkish.
I mean, if you promise,
the Labour leader has been way back for decades as an MP. He has been very clear that he thinks the Turkish troops have to be withdrawn from Cyprus, and he's very clear about that. A one-island solution, and the Turkish troops have to withdraw. And he's been actually quite vocal on this for a lot longer than he's from his time as an MP in Islington. He's been very clear on that. The Labour position is very clear. We have to have the Turkish troops withdrawn. We have to have a republic, a federation, and an agreement over how both communities are represented in that. Bizonal, bicommunal is the way forward, and having a Cypriot government. And we, as a guarantor of power, have a particular duty to ensure that happens, and to work with Greece and Turkey to ensure that happens. Mm-hmm. And you know, Cyprus is in the Commonwealth. It's in the European Union. There is a very big Cypriot population in the United Kingdom. Cyprus is a brother and sister country to us. You know, we have a very close relationship with Cyprus, and actually a top priority for the Labour government. And the Labour Party has been very clear about that pushing for a resolution to Cyprus is something that we will fully engage with and press. And we are quite prepared to criticise the Turkish overstepping the mark in terms of drilling. And the Labour Party's position has been far clearer on being vocal about that. So you do have to stand up to bullies, and I think the current Erdogan is a bully, and I think we need to stand up to him as a country. And if that means we don't get such a good trade deal then from Turkey after we leave Brexit, post-Brexit, then sometimes you have to do the right thing. I don't think it will come to that, because I think if you put pressure on, we want to be friends with Turkey, we want to be friends with Greece, we want a united Cyprus. That's the clear position, but we cannot allow when Turkey is making the situation worse, we have to be very firm and stand up to Turkey and say no.
Ross Houston from Scotland.
Yes,
and,
Scotland and Finchley.
Finchley. So you, in your area, which area you're representing?
Finchley Golders Green.
Okay.
I'm a councillor in West Finchley, and I live in North Finchley.
Okay, and we have against you Mike Freer, Conservative.
Yes.
Is that okay? And Luciana Burgeon, Liberal Democrats.
Yes.
Okay.
And there's only 3 candidates in Finchley.
Only 3, yes. Okay. So, closing with a special message to the voters, especially the Cypriots and Greeks.
Yeah.
What would you...
Well, my special message is that the Labour Party has a solution that will allow the country to resolve Brexit and hopefully remain in the European Union. And put this issue to bed and remain as firm partners of our European neighbours. Even if a Labour negotiated Brexit deal is the one that wins that referendum, it will be a soft Brexit that still allows us to have a very close relationship with Europe, not the extreme version of Brexit the Conservatives are proposing. But we will campaign for Remain, and we will get a Remain result, because people know that what was promised in the referendum wasn't deliverable. And I am very confident that Labour MPs up and down the country will campaign for Remain and will win that referendum. In terms of, I have been a person that's got a long interest in the issue of Cyprus. I've got so many Greek and Cypriot friends, and it is a matter of, I've been to Cyprus on many happy family holidays. I've seen the Green Line in Nicosia. I've been to Pathos, is one of my favourite places in Cyprus. And I've had very happy family holiday memories there. If I'm elected as an MP, Cyprus will be one of my top priorities, pressing Labour's foreign policy to see a just solution for Cyprus. And that means one united federal island with a bicommunal and bizonal arrangements. It means a restitution of an agreement on the outstanding property issues. And it means allowing that beautiful island to move forward into the future without the last divided capital in Europe. It is a matter of shame, as for people in Britain, I think it should be a matter of shame that we are a guarantor of power that hasn't fulfilled our promise as a guarantor of power to solve the solution to Cyprus following the invasion of the Turkish invasion. We need to end this. This is the last border in Europe. This is the last country in Europe that is divided. Everyone knows the solution, and Labour has, and the MP for Finchley and Golders Green have to be at the forefront of pressing for a solution to this problem, so that people in our community in London and in the UK and people in Cyprus can move forward in their lives. So many of my friends have their lives almost. This is an issue that really affects people who have lost property, people who have had to move. It affects families. It affects across generations. And we need to resolve this. It's an absolute scandal that it's outstanding. And we need to work with our European partners to make sure this issue is resolved.
Mr. Houston, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
It was a pleasure to have you in the studio.
And it was lovely to be here.
And
thank you.
We wish you all the best.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for all you do. Hellenic Television to raise the issues for the Cypriot community, particularly in London. And I know I've got many friends who watch you.
Thank you.
Both on live and on online, because I think a lot of people do actually use the online service now.
Yes, definitely, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you very much again.
Thank you very much.
You. And we'd like to say a big thank you to Dr. Vasilis Mavrou and Varosi Lettings for supporting us and sponsoring our show. Thank you very much. Thank you for watching, and we see you next Sunday. Thank you.